How are you?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm not too bad. One man band sounds good to me.
I kind of like the sound of that, but the only problem is that means I would have to do it again, and it's a lot of work setting up those mics. The music part was fun, but I've never been my own recording engineer for an entire album, so this was a learning experience.
What inspired doing an album entirely by yourself?
We were kind of by ourselves quarantining like most people who were fortunate enough to be able to quarantine. And I have a studio at my house. I had wanted to record a gospel album for a while. Never really got around to it just because, kind of life gets in the way. And I found myself with some time and a whole bunch of instruments. And I decided I wanted to record some of those songs. And while I was doing that, I came up with some ideas for some original music too. And it kind of turned into an album of faith, which is why it's called Alone with My Faith, because I was literally alone. I played all of the instruments and did all the singing, background singing, and then I recorded it, and now here we are.
Talk to me a little bit more about how you made it. I know you were joking around, but it was a lot of setting up mics. But I guess were you sort of pre-planning all these things? Okay, I want to have trombone on this, I want to have piano on this, or was it was more improvisatory? What I have on hand.
It was improvisatory completely. I mean, I would start with a song like Amazing Grace, and I liked the way it sounded with just me and the piano. And then when it came time to sing the second verse, I thought it might be cool to add something else. So I changed it up a little bit, added a synthesizer and an organ. And then the next verse came. I'm like, wow, maybe I should add, some background vocals, which turned into about 30 background vocals. And then I thought, well, let's wind it up in New Orleans. It's such a cool song. Let's just finish it with some jubilation. So I added the horns and the drums, and everything on the album is a real instrument. There are no sort of garage band style instruments. So it took quite a while. You mentioned finger snaps. I mean, everything is real, but I think it lends an authenticity to the music that you can't really get with fake instruments.
It's an interesting thing because I don't want to pigeonhole you here, but I guess the music I know you best from is largely improvisatory music. You know what I mean? It's jazz, it's collaborative music. I've watched you play with combos. I've seen you feed off the energy of other musicians on stage. So what happens when you're by yourself?
It's not dissimilar only because I think I think when you're by yourself for long enough, you know, there are you can respond to things that you've done in a different way. So if I play a piano track and I go down, go get ready to record an organ part, I'm hearing the piano, but I've kind of forgotten what I played, and I'm just sort of responding real time to that. So it's not the same as collaborating live, but because there was no time constraint on this project, I was able to just build upon tracks that I had laid down. And plus I'm used to playing solo anyway. I mean, I've done solo piano records and I'm used to the idea of not collaborating. But the real interesting thing was that there was no recording engineer. I mean, normally somebody's in the control room, they say, okay, take one, and they hit the button and you play. That didn't exist. So setting up the mics, being the engineer was interesting. So I had to make sure I came up with a workflow that was conducive to how I like to record, which
I'm
is fast.
I'm imagining a lot of editing out of like the record button and then the steps walking over to
Oh,
the piano.
oh, if I can make an album of just those sounds, you would hear mics falling, you would hear dogs barking, you would hear that'd be an interesting record because there's plenty of that. You'd hear like the most distorted, awful sounding stuff. There's somewhere you could barely hear me singing, just like, everything in between. That's
there's
just
there's
not
a
my skill
solid like
set.
Captain Beefheart record in it, like a solid abstract music record
Yeah,
of
exactly.
your.
That's what it would be. It would be like, yeah, for sure.
Did you learn something about yourself as a musician doing this?
um, I, I, it was just, it was a real time manifestation of who I am right now. So it's not like I learned anything new about myself as a musician, but the ideas that came as a result of this process happened then and will never happen again, because it was almost like a stream of consciousness thing. So I learned that that I loved this process, that it may be easier with a recording engineer next time, but I loved it. I've never been alone in the studio for an entire album. So I guess it just confirmed my feelings of, infinite joy when I make music.
Does it change things going forward?
It's really an interesting question, because I think it kind of does. Like one thing I did on this album that I've never done was when I was writing the music, the music was a response to what was happening in real time. Let's say I break up with my girlfriend. The last thing I want to do is go and sit and write a song about breaking up with my girlfriend, just because I don't, it's bigger than music. Those emotions I don't feel like creating music when something happens like that. But this was different, because this was this wasn't an acute type of tragedy, this whole pandemic. This was more of a slow burn over the last year, and I had a lot of chance to kind of think about things. I wrote about things, and I performed the things in real time. And I noticed that I like that. I don't know if we'll ever have a situation like that again, but I also noticed that the people I talk to about this record are hearing. It's like they're learning about me as opposed to a musical project that I have. It's more personal. So maybe I did learn something about myself as a musician. Maybe I need to do more recording where it's a combination of musicality and soul searching, because it's usually just like where I'm at musically, but this one was very, very personal.
If you're just tuning in, my guest is musician, singer, songwriter, actor, Grammy winner Harry Connick Jr. His new album Alone with My Faith is out now. Take a listen to this.
Alone with my faith, what I know is true, what gives me assurance when I don't know what to do. I don't have all the answers, but I have always known I'm eternally.
That is Alone with My Faith, the title track off the record. Harry, tell me more about the soul searching.
I'd like to tell you about those finger snaps. Those are some good finger snaps, man.
They're soulful.
I am a professional snappist. Yeah, hey, you're not so bad yourself.
Come on, my rates are reasonable. Tell me about this. Tell me a little bit more.
I could have used you over those 8 months. I would have paid you a lot of money just to come stand in the room and talk to me and snap.
That's my dream. That's my dream job. It is a year where we've been looking. That you said that earlier. You said I've been doing a lot of soul searching. It's a year that a lot of us been doing it.
Yeah, it's been a profound experience. I think what's the most profound about it is that we're sharing it. There's not a person that you can talk to on this planet that hasn't felt the impacts of this and has had to adjust their life accordingly. It's been laden with personal loss and tragedy for most of us, but it's also been a time of unexpected blessings, and I've had a chance to really just think, and reflect in ways that, when you're rocking and rolling and traveling and doing this and that, I pray and I think, but it's different now. You know what I'm saying? It's different. You have more time at home, and it's just been. For everything that's made me cry, there have been things that have really given me great joy. So it's been the full spectrum for me.
It's almost like when everything is taken away, what's left and what matters,
I think so, and maybe because I was one of the lucky ones who could quarantine at home. And so I guess we it was kind of a great equalizer in that we all experienced the pandemic, but when you're at a certain level and then you watch TV or you go outside and you see somebody that's working in a grocery store or cleaning a hospital or teaching grammar school or doing something that is making our lives easier, it really hits home in a different kind of way. I mean, the people picking up our trash, when this stuff started, they didn't stop picking up the trash. And you got to wonder what these men and women are thinking about, you know, not knowing what we were headed into. I mean, and that really gave me pause and made me pray and thank these men and women for all that they were doing.
I mean, this is could go into a too personal realm, and you let me know how much you want to talk about here. But has your faith at this level and like a love of the music surrounding it been with you since you were young?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Long story short, my mother was Jewish. My father, who's going to be 95 this month, is Catholic. They met and got married in the 1950s in North Africa. They moved to New Orleans. I was born in 1967. My father wanted me to be baptized. My mom didn't. She wanted me and my sister to decide what religion we wanted to be. We both eventually decided to be Catholic. When I was 13, I decided that's what I want. My mother had just died. I wanted to feel like I was part of this community that I was familiar with because I had been going to church with my dad my whole life. And it was kind of the first signpost of faith for me that has been a part of my life ever since. I think whether it's a result of my mother having different beliefs or the intellectualization of the notion of faith, or a combination thereof, it's been something that I've questioned at times. It's been something that's, for the most part, has given me incredible peace and comfort. But it's really, again, a full spectrum of emotion with regard to faith. And I'm happy to talk about it. I really talk about it when it's in a discussion like this. It's not something that I would, lead off with, just because my style is a little bit different than that. But I'm thrilled to talk about it.
It's never been incongruent, hey? Like your faith, your spirituality, your religiosity has never been. It can seem incongruent with the touring rock and roll, jazz, piano lifestyle. You know,
not really.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of like there are a lot. I wasn't implying that what you just asked was kind of a question that I get asked all the time, but I get asked things like, "Oh, you've been married a long time. That doesn't happen in Hollywood a lot." Well, it does actually.
Yeah.
And marriages fall apart outside of Hollywood. People say, "Oh, you can't really talk about your faith anymore." I don't really know what that means. Like, I have no problem talking about it. I've never met a person in my life who said, "Please don't talk about your faith." Never had an issue with it. So things like religion, faith, my lifestyle, I would think that it's expected of us to manage those as they coexist, as opposed to them being mutually exclusive. I think we're smarter than that. I think as an artist, I should be creative enough to navigate through life with all of the things that are important to me, which is the lifestyle of a performing artist, in tandem with my religious beliefs and my faith, and at the same time, be completely loving toward people who think the total opposite.
I guess that was my next question is, I mean, are you thinking about either folks who don't believe what you believe or folks perhaps who don't believe at all when you're putting out a record like this? Are you thinking about how they might take it in?
I didn't, because if I thought about that, I'd have to examine every album I do with a different lens. Like, if it was about appealing to people, I probably should have started playing pop music.
Right.
Because you know what I'm saying? But I started playing jazz music. Like, that wasn't the most popular kind of music in the world. And then when my big band records were doing really well, I did a 180 and started playing New Orleans funk music, which I had played my whole life. And people said, why are you doing that? But they didn't know that I had a history of playing that, of New Orleans funk. But it was something that was important to me. So one thing I'm really proud of is I've never sat around a table with a committee of people deciding what kind of record I'm going to make. I've never worried about if it was going to, my record company's not going to like this. I've never worried about it if it was going to sell. That said, I am the first in line to do interviews and promote it because I realize it takes a group of people to sell an album, and I want people to hear it. But what I'm saying is I don't base what I record on the prospect of it being liked or disliked because it's a really slippery slope. So I go into my heart, I make the music that means something to me. And I've found over the last 30 years of recording that I think people respond more favorably to sincerity than they do whatever kind of music it is.
Where do you think that comes from? Not everybody has that.
My parents. I mean, my mother and father were leaders. I remember my mom told me once, she told me a lot, actually, when I was like in kindergarten. I went to public school. And she would say, be a leader today, be a leader. And I remember when the lunch bell rang and everybody left their classrooms and ran across the playground to get in line for lunch, I made sure I was the first one in line. And I would come home and I said, Mom, I was a leader today. She goes, what happened? I said, I was the first one in the lunch line. She said, so I didn't understand, what that meant. But it's being able to not only stand up for what you believe in, but figure out a way to broadcast those beliefs in a way that will help further change if it's good. I grew up in New Orleans. We have Mardi Gras down there. Every single parade in Mardi Gras up until 1993 was all white men, except for one that was all women and one that was all Black. I was in a parade when I was 25. I had never seen it from the vantage point of being in the parade. And the only Black people in the parade were either in marching bands, a guy who was handing me my beads, who was known as a valet, or these men called flambeaux. Flambeaux were oil lantern carrying dancers who would light the way for the floats to go by before they had street lights. And people would throw them nickels and dimes. So here I am, white guy on a float, dressed to the nines with a bunch of other white men. And you could see people tossing nickels and dimes to these men carrying these oil torches. Woke up the next morning. I told my dad, we got to start a parade. I got to do something about this. This is an injustice. I have no problem if a club wants to be dedicated to a particular group of people, that's fine. But when it's to the exclusion of at least one parade that is inclusive of men, women, white, Black, whatever, there's a fundamental problem. And especially when it's something as socially significant as Mardi Gras. So I said, I'm going to start this parade. And the next year we started Orpheus. I could ride with my wife. I could ride with my Black friends, people of color. And this is 1993. This is my lifetime. And you can't believe it exists. But those are the ways in which I like to try to change the world if I can. I'm not changing the world, but to change my world a little bit. And for me, that's how I try to do it.
It's a really powerful story. And thanks for sharing it. Maybe this is a good way to close things off. What are you most looking forward to? I mean, what an experience you've had over this past year, not only just learning how to make a record by yourself and, like I said, pulling cables and microphone and all the very unglamorous side of things, making a record by yourself, exploring your own faith, deepening your own perspective like we all have. What are you hoping life looks like after this thing? I'm hoping that all of those men and women that are out there get a break. They get a vacation. I think about all of these men and women who have been on the front lines tirelessly. I pray for them every night. I really, really do. I can't imagine what their lives are like. And thank God we have these vaccines coming out. And I just think like, yeah, okay, I'll go on tour and all that. I'll whatever, whenever that's time. But I think about, man, these people,
let them go out without a mask and get back to some normalcy. And then after that happens, then, you know, you and I'll have another discussion, hopefully.
Hey, congratulations on the record.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to talk to you.
You too.